Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Tuesday, February 10th, 2026 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. During this hour and 15 minutes, we'll be having a conversation with our Agency of Commerce and Economic Development on the FY27 budget. And so we have Secretary Curley with us.
And also for the record, Lindsay Curley, Secretary of Commerce and Community Development. I am with our fiscal director.
Dan Dickerson, Director of Administrative Services for ACCD.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us and for the opportunity to walk you through our FY 2027 budget and priorities. So, most of you know this. This is a second time around, so to speak, but the purpose, the mission of the Agency of Commerce is to improve the quality of life for Vermonters by building strong, resilient communities across all 14 counties. And we do this through 3 core areas of work, and you'll hear from the commissioners of each: economic development, housing and community development, and tourism and marketing. Our programs and services support employers, entrepreneurs, municipalities, communities, and families. We help businesses navigate the challenge of starting and growing businesses, including helping with their workforce needs. We promote Vermont as a place to visit and to live. And we work with towns to expand housing and strengthen their downtowns overall. And at the end of the day, our job is to grow Vermont's economy in a way that improves affordability and supports the people who live and work here. So today, you're going to hear a brief overview of the agency and our department's budget, outline of the governor's recommended FY27 budget for our agency, and we'll highlight a few of the investments that we are requesting. We're building on our programs that are already delivering results. These requests are designed to address Vermont's most pressing needs, particularly, and you won't be surprised to hear this, housing supply, community revitalization, and economic growth. Also, and this is important, our budget proposal is just one part of a broader housing strategy that the administration is working towards advancing this session, and you'll hear more about that from Commissioner Farrell. In that, just to kind of give you a high level overview on that, we are working on some policy changes intended to lower the cost and complexity of building homes and expanding housing opportunities across our state. Some of the changes that we are aiming for is to provide small scale developers and builders with open source home building designs through something called the 802 Homes Initiative, expanding by right housing to every state municipality relating to regionally reviewed housing designs, pre-approved designs, and broadening local pathways to housing by incorporating housing targets within municipal zoning, and continuing our Homes for All trainings to expand the bench of small scale developers and home builders. Before we get into the details, I want to acknowledge the broader fiscal environment that we're operating in. As the governor highlighted in his budget address this year, the state's primary financial pressure point is in the education fund. And that reality is really shaping budget decisions across all of state government. So our proposal is intentionally restrained and focused on targeting a small number of investments where we know that they will unlock housing, supporting employers and communities, and delivering measurable economic returns for Vermonters. So with that, our FY27 budget is approximately $75.2 million. That includes base funding and limited one-time investments. The primary new request that you'll hear about today is $4 million that we're asking for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, VHIP, to go into base funding. As many of you know, it's been one-time funding in the past. It's proven to be very successful. And without the base funding, we are at extreme risk of not being able to continue this program. So permanent funding is critical to sustain the staff who administer it, and provide predictability and stability to the community partners that help us deploy it. Again, I mentioned Commissioner Farrell will be here to talk more in detail. Another thing that we're asking for is a one-time investment focused on workforce expansion and long-term economic community resilience. Improvements to manufactured housing communities, which again, Commissioner Farrell will talk about, And then also another one-time investment we are seeking is international business development efforts. And Commissioner Jepson will talk about that when he is in the seat. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan and he can probably walk us through the agency budget. And also, again, as I mentioned, I just want to share who else is in the room. We have Commissioner Farrell over here, Commissioner Jepson, Economic Development, Commissioner Pelham, Tourism and Marketing, and our newest employee. This is Kevin Lambert, and Kevin joins us he was formerly at the USDA Rural Development, and he is joining our senior leadership team, filling a vacant position there. So we're really excited to have Kevin on board, and I wanted you all to know why he was in the room with us. Dan, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. Excuse me. So I'm going to start. I've got a printout, and if you're following along electronically, I'm going to start at what would be slide 4, which should look roughly like this. And so ACCD is broken down among 4 separate individual operating appropriations. We have the Department of Administration, which is the secretary, the deputy secretary, finance and admin staff, and then our contracts and grants team. And then the 3 departments that have the programs that are working directly with Vermonters: Department of Economic Development, Department of Housing and Community Development, and Department of Tourism and Marketing. As Secretary Curley noted, in FY27, as far as our new, what we would call base initiatives or ongoing funded initiatives, we are requesting $4 million of ongoing money to support the Vermont Housing Improvement. As I get further into the weeds on the budget, you'll see that that's roughly broken out about $250,000 for staffing and administration to support the program within the agency, and then the remaining $3.75 million we would intend to grant out to our partners who have been working with us on that program, and then further out to the individuals that are providing the units. Excuse me. And so that leaves our total base budget request, and this is slide 5, at $74.21 million. And we've got a little pie chart explaining how that's broken out. We're 37% general funds as an agency, 19% special funds, and I'll, as we get into the departments, I'll break out what those various special funds are. 43% federal funds, still a very substantial part of our funding picture. And then as of FY27, we would be receiving a very small amount of transportation fund. And I'll go into detail on what that means going forward. So also Secretary Curley alluded to 2 one-time expenditures that we're requesting funding for. This would be slide 6. So within the Department of Economic Development, over the past several years, we have supported an office in Montreal that's working as an in-market representative to communicate with businesses that are interested in establishing a U.S. foothold and doing that sort of groundwork on behalf of Vermont. That contract and the funding for that contract would be up at the end of FY26. So we're looking for funding to continue supporting that office. And as Commissioner Jepson comes up, you can ask questions on what that means and what that office has done. And then another one-time expenditure would be $800,000 to continue supporting the manufactured home improvement and repair program. And I'll just step back for a moment, and I want to clarify that the program does receive base funding in the DHCD budget. This is sort of a supplement to that. It's money that we had received from the emergency board following, I believe, was that the 24 flood? The 23, okay. So we received funding after the 23 flood to basically for manufactured home lots that had been damaged extensively by flooding. This was to buy out those lots and remove those homes. We had some money left over, but we couldn't really do anything with it. And so we thought if we could offer that money back and get a new appropriation to help with the MER program, that could put it to some good use. And so we're essentially swapping one set of money for another set of money, if that makes sense.
So it's like a reversion.
Mhm.
So, okay, so it's not new money in the budget, it's just from last year's budget.
This would be from FY, would have been the FY 24.
So
Yeah,
it's money you've been holding on to.
Yes.
yeah, so it's not new.
And is that for the same purpose or for a different purpose?
It's a different purpose.
Okay.
And that's because the way the money had previously been sent to us, it was pretty limited. The scope of the program had ended. And so we were just sort of sitting on this, and we could have given it back and had it go to sort of general use, but we thought, well, you know, if we put it to MER, it sort of keeps it in the same universe, but it broadens the scope and would allow us to continue working within that realm.
There's language in the budget document for that.
Yes, and I just wanted to add, I mean, Commissioner Farrell can talk more about it, but one thing about MER is it really helps us keep maybe folks that are housed a little bit vulnerably from losing housing and contributing to our houseless population. So we again, we're oversubscribed every year in that program. And so we feel that this money will be best used to put toward this program, not creating a new program and not just dumping it somewhere else. So, but Commissioner Farrell will talk more.
So slide 7 is basically the same as slide 5, except we've added in the little bit of one-time money that we're asking for. And so that takes our budget up to the 75.16 billion.
What's the increase to your base budget? 3%?
It ends up being on the general fund side, I think we're closer to 4%. And that's simply because we had put together a budget that kept us at 3%. And then in December, we always find out about health benefit changes and internal service fund changes like fee for space. So that drove it up a little bit higher. So with that, I'm going to move into the administration division. So just to give you a high level overview, as I noted, this is where the secretary and deputy secretary reside, and then also our administration team, so finance and contracts and grants function. We have 15 for FY27. We'll be at 15 total positions. As I go through this presentation, I'll note that this agency has been very reliant on many limited service positions that were created when the ARPA funding came through to implement those programs, and those positions will begin phasing out in FY27. So the staffing that I show here basically shows where we are after those positions expire. So currently, we have 2 limited service positions that are supporting the important work that we're still trying to get to the finish line on.
Before you move on, how many of those positions are vacant right now?
We have 1 vacant position. It's an exempt position, and it's sort of been a little bit of back and forth with the folks that approve the filling in those positions and then finding the right person to fill it. But we do have 1 vacancy currently.
How long has it been vacant?
It's been about 6 months.
I can add a little bit about it. Like we've made a couple offers and just haven't been able to meet at least one official offer, meet the salary demand. And another one just was not looking to go in that direction, so to speak. So it's not for lack of trying. We still a very valuable position to us, and we plan to fill it very soon.
Yeah. And by and large, at least with our permanent positions, when we have vacancies, those tend to fill very quickly. And so as an agency, we have the 1 vacancy within admin. We have a vacancy within DED. I think that's it. I think DHCD is fully, as far as permanent staff, fully employed, and tourism marketing is as well. So we're in good shape. Yeah. So this is a sheet that we always walk through every year with the appropriations committee. This is our quote unquote ups and downs. And so I'll just sort of go through this quickly for administration, and then we'll have the different departments or the different commissioners come up and go through, and then I'll go through the ups and downs. So what you see on this general fund column, starting from salary wages to really workers' comp. Those are all increases that are completely out of our control, that are driven by, the folks that are here long term. They get a cost of living increase each year. They get step increases each year that recognizes their time in service. Our health premiums typically go up every year, sort of out of our control. Retirement is changing a little bit. And then our workers' comp premium, that's driven by decisions made at the agency of administration, so also out of our control. When I build the ACC administration budget, I usually assume roughly 2% of our salary benefit costs as vacancy savings. So I basically subtract that out of our cost, assuming that we will have a vacancy during the year, and that would save us a little bit of money. So that's why you see a little bit of movement there. One miscellaneous change. There's this new allocation that now goes to the governor's office. If you asked me to explain what it was for, I would have no idea. Maybe we get donuts if we show up there at some point in time, but I don't know. I don't get to go there. And then finally,
So one thing we've been hearing is that as the federal positions contract, the jobs that people have in Vermont, they're changing their insurance choices to cover more families rather than individuals. And I'm curious if you're seeing that.
that is a really good question. And it's the disconnect between when we're building the budgets and when those decisions were made is significant enough that if it's something that I could analyze now because we're past January 1st, but when people make those decisions in December or in November, we've already got the budget done. And so we can't really account for that until the following year budget. And so
it's not reflected in this, but you
Yeah,
have
it's-
information.
yeah, the information's out there now, and it's something that I probably should look at and just see like, okay, where did those health elections change? But this reflects where they would have been in calendar year 25. But that is a good question. And I suspect there probably will be some of that within our agency. So this negative 34,000, we had partnered with the Department of Labor for a few years to contract. They held a contract with Dun & Bradstreet, and that firm provided us some information on, I believe, demographics, some housing information. And then starting in FY26, we actually budgeted to share half of the cost for this contract. And after that, the Department of Labor did not renew it. And so now we're dropping those costs out of the budget. And that's all the information I have on that, but it's just something where, we had partnered with them and then they didn't renew the contract.
You're looking elsewhere to gather that information, that data?
The Department of Labor they have their labor market information division. Matt Barowitz leads that. And so I think they're able to access a lot of the data and analyze it in-house.
To you?
Yeah. And we've actually not shown here, this is something that we had built in that's not actually changing, but we have set aside some money in our budget in the event that we ask the Department of Labor to do some work for us. We could then pay them for it as a courtesy. On the operating side, I mean, most of these numbers, once again, are things that are out of our hands as far as the insurances, what we pay for the vision accounting system, what we pay for our human resource services. I will note that the monies that we pay to, across the agency to ADS for technology services have gone up a lot. And I get that because it's a complicated universe and there are a lot of security issues and a lot of technology issues that were, and I wouldn't even call them issues, just technology is constantly changing and we have to make sure that we keep up. But it definitely, when we're told to stay within the 3%, it's tough when a big chunk of that goes to another agency. But like I said, that is what it is. So that's a piece of the growth here. Our rent goes up annually on the space that we rent at National Life. And then finally under grants, we have an ongoing grant agreement with the UVM Census Data Center. They requested a minor increase. And when we did the look back, we hadn't actually adjusted for inflation since 2020. So we gave them additional, we're budgeting an additional 10,000. So currently the grant is 50,000. They would go up to 60 per year. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. And then I know you said it's another agency, so it might be hard to, but all the ADS line items, and I saw it throughout the entire presentation, and also I think when, I just anecdotally heard from members of the Digital Infrastructure Committee that when they saw the ADS budget this year, it was much lower than in the past. And they explained that they were basically disseminating a bunch of different chunks of their own budget to other agencies. So I'm guessing that's like what we're seeing here, but I'm just curious if you guys could talk through who decided that, how it was decided, communication of that, and especially as I'm assuming we're going to keep seeing this on other people's budgets too.
I'm going to approach this very delicately because ADS is our state government partner and they do great work. But as a finance person, the communication as to what was changing with the budget was minimal. And so it all sort of came to us at the last minute, and then we were told to build it in. But the way our relationship with ADS works is sort of in a few ways. So one is we pay what's called a standard charge that gets applied to all agencies based on their staffing. So a per person charge for using like Microsoft 365, a lot of the standard platforms that we have access to. And then on top of that, there's what's called a service level agreement where ADS would incorporate other needs that may be more specific to a given agency. And then on top of that, they would charge for their hours that were sort of above and beyond. If we called and had a help desk request, or if we said, hey, we're looking at making this investment in a grants management system, then they would bill us hours for those types of things. So there's really like multiple ways that we could pay ADS for either services or software. And what I can't tell you at this point is what I could tell you for FY26, but what I can't tell you for FY27 is where those costs are in those three buckets. We just never really got that communication. And it is a little frustrating, but I also understand, like I said, it's a rapidly changing universe and they're obviously our partners. And, we want to make sure that we have the technology support we need, but that's I think that's probably about as much as I could tell you without having more information from the source.
One follow-up, thank you. And I understand this is a little bit of an unfair question, but also just trying to make sure we're having this conversation. So, for the ADS stuff, I had asked Joint Fiscal to look into how much our tech budget was across state government, and they're actually not able to come up with that because it's dispersed throughout so many different areas. So I'm just curious, if you're maybe even just thinking about past budgets, I assume it makes it much harder for you to be able to actually budget what your expectations, especially future projections. I'm just curious, would it be easier in your world if there was an ADS budget and then your budget and everybody knew what was going on in tech?
Yeah, I don't try to speculate on
Sure.
the complexity of ADS and how they build their budget. And so I would just say that, the positive is when we get the number for the ADS allocated charge and the ADS agreement charge, that's static and that's a good thing. I think the uncertainty is around the timesheet, the hours that they would spend doing other work. And I think that's where they've tried to make an adjustment to their model to make that a little easier to predict. But because we're only going into that for I don't know where it's going to land. But I feel good about where they're trying to go and that they're trying to make progress and serve, the other agencies better. So I appreciate that. So that's yes.
We move on. I know you don't have a giant department and not so many employees, But with the return to work, did you have to get more space? Is there additional rent costs or anything like that? Or how has that, I mean, you don't have a lot of vacancies, which tells me that it didn't impact that. Or if it did, you were able to hire quickly. So I'm curious how that has impacted.
So at this point, we've largely not been impacted by the return to office. I will note that there's a substantial backlog of folks that may or may not have requested either exemptions or other things that those get sorted out through the agency of administration. So I think I don't know how many folks within ACCD asked for that, and it's something that I probably shouldn't be privy to. But to the extent that folks did, and those decisions haven't been made, that could be a future impact that we don't know yet. But as it stands, we're constrained by, we're one floor of one building on the National Life campus, and so we can't grow outward without taking space from ADS, who shares the floor with us. And I think they're dealing with their own challenges as far as like they've got a huge workforce, and they definitely did not have the space for everyone. So I think the space we have is the space we have. And what we have explored is, going forward, where can we modify our existing space to maximize the number of folks that we can fit? And we've got some plans that we've explored, although we haven't made any firm commitments just because there's some budget uncertainty and there are other things that we're focused on making sure that, all this housing work, has the resources that it needs to be successful. We've built out, we're in the process of building out or incorporating many of our programs into a new grants management system called IntelliGrants or IGX. And so that's been a pretty big investment. So we're, at least for putting my hat on of being the responsible person for ACC finances, it's something we've certainly explored is like, how can we fit better within our existing space? But we haven't made any firm commitments yet, because by and large, we're okay right now.
So
That doesn't change.
you didn't directly answer, so I want to just.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Is there money built into this budget that is an increase in rent costs? An increase in.
Nothing in this budget. We have some carry forward funding that we've relied on to, like I said, build out this grants management system. And we've got a little bit of money that we could use if needed for space modifications, but nothing that would be ongoing in nature.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned the grants management system. Are there other systems that you're currently building? Like that's the kind of thing that I don't have.
Sure. That's the only one. So and the reason it's not in here is because we've tried to find other ways of paying for the work so that we're not hitting the budget on an ongoing basis and requiring ongoing general fund. And so to the extent that we've had a little bit of leftover money here and there, we also received substantial ARPA funds that have helped us build out this grants management system. So that's been the primary source. But we're in the process of getting 4 existing programs onto that platform. So our Vermont Economic Growth Incentive, our Vermont Training Program, the CDBG program, and then the Municipal Planning Grant Program. So those are the first 4 that will be on this platform. And then the new CHIP program, the application just went live, is on that platform. They're still building out some of the back end pieces for reviewing the grants. But we miraculously, we just started that work of getting CHIP onto that grants management system in October. And the fact that we got to January and we were able to do it, get this done that fast is just, it's a great testament to the help that ADS has provided to get us to that point. The folks within BEPC, Jess Hartley-Ben, who you've probably seen in here, and her staff. Yeah. And then, support staff within the agency. It's been an all hands on deck effort to get CHIP to a place where we could start receiving applications. But I would say without having the ARPA money that helped us get those first 4 programs onto the Agate and Telegrants platform, I don't know that we could have gotten there in the speed that we did with CHIP. So it's really wonderful. And I appreciate the fact that, the legislature gave us this money to start this grants management system work. And it should simplify the user experience for folks that are applying to our programs, because they'll now get sort of one user experience as opposed to different grant programs having different applications. Makes it a little messy. So that's the administration budget. If there are no questions, I think
I can
if you
jump
want to
out.
swap
Who's
with Commissioner Jepson to
Right.
come up and go through DED.
Thank you.
Have the easy task of basically thanking you for what you've already done and only asking for one thing. So we'll leave everything, all the asks to someone else, but sorry. Nick Brimley is the deputy commissioner, and hopefully he'll be able to come in, and maybe you've met him in the past. We have 21 staff members in our department. Of those, there are 4 that are limited service, and I'll explain what they're using their limited service time on. But if you go to page 11, hopefully you're seeing the money there and some numbers. To the left is the CRRP and CIP awards. That was during COVID. There was a lot of money, and there were lots of grants given out to the tune of 155 grants. Those limited service positions have been working on those grants. They will be sunsetting at the end of this year. So we'll be losing those staff members as they go out and monitor. There's a lot of monitoring. You think you've given out all the money. Now we want to make sure the money was used as expected. So now those folks are going out and they're actually doing site visits, and they're making sure everything has happened the way we expected it to. The next piece of that is 421 million. And
At
sorry?
what point will we get a report back on what they found, that making sure businesses apply correctly?
That's my homework. I'll get an answer for that. I will say I've seen their spreadsheet. It's great. So the next piece is 421 million, which is brownfields funding that has gone out over the past many years. This past year, we had 23 million that went out. Having come from an RDC in the Rutland area, if there was not brownfields funding, a lot of the projects would not be happening. We need to clean up the dirt before we can do the housing or whatever the other projects are. And that is what that program does, and has done an amazing job at it.
Some of that money used for the redevelopment in Rutland?
Yes. Yep. $18.3 million. It's very interesting to see how much money is coming into the state from exports. And those exports, a lot of them go to Canada. If you look at that number, you'll see 5.9 billion in parentheses there. And you might say to yourself, well, what is that? Services is primarily intellectual property sales, our captive insurance industry, which is huge in the state of Vermont, the travel industry, engineering services, education services, those types of things. 1.2 billion is the VEGGIE program, and that is capital investment. Not only does VEGGIE work to increase jobs, but it also increases the equipment that is brought into the state. And that investment is very large over the last many years. The VEGGIE program hopefully will be sunset this year, if that, or is the sunset will be eliminated this year so that we can continue that program. Better say that, right?
Yeah.
Please don't sunset VEGGIE. We would like that to continue well into the future. And the Vermont Training Program, probably the easiest program that businesses can use to support education and training that I have seen ever. There are over 15,000 folks who have been trained or retrained since 2017. So this is the ask, the $150,000 for the International Business Development Program. We hire a Montreal-based firm that is in the business of directing investment and getting lead generation for us. So they've put together a report, which I can share with you, that points out just how many leads they have, who they are they following up? And the question you might ask is, well, is it working, Lyle? And the answer is yes. So we have businesses in Waterbury, in Burlington, and in other places around the state that have moved in from Canada. And this firm has helped us do that. Quite worth continuing.
So when is that report available now? I think that's something we'd like to see.
Absolutely. And that, you'll see several years on that report.
Yeah, I think I think it'd be good for us to see when we started the office and then all the leads and then leads that came to fruition. I think kind of looking for an ROI on it.
Where's the data? Yeah. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see some of the program highlights as it describes it there. Going back to the Veggie program, you'll see the number of jobs that were created in just 2023. You've probably heard a lot about TIF in the past, so I will just pause to see if you have any questions. You're probably wondering, is there another community out there that is trying to get one? The answer is yes. Newport is actively working towards a TIF project. Every community has a pit and they're ready to get rid of their pit, just as Rutland is getting rid of theirs because of brownfield money and because of TIF, the TIF.
How many TIFs are available left?
So I think there are 4 left. They're testing me, I'm sorry. I think there are 9 active and there are 4 left.
Thank you.
Just Hartleben would know that like that. Okay. And the CHIP program, you've heard a lot about that. Jess may have been in to talk about it. It's gone live. And we're very excited about that. You're aware that $2 billion worth of potential housing infrastructure has been now made available because of that, $200 million a year. And the economic assistance piece, that's the CRRP and CIP money that came as a result of COVID and flowed into the state. Those are where those temporary positions are now working through that process. Going to the next slide, this is the Vermont Training Program funding that's gone out in FY20.
Before you move on, so the ARPA money all has to be spent by the end of this year.
It does.
And it's like in the middle of our fiscal year. So we're gonna see some money in the budget, but it's winding down. Are we gonna have it all spent? Is that?
Our goal is to have all of it spent. So we have actively reached out to make sure that projects that said they're going to use the money are going to use the money. If they're not using the money, then we're clawing that money back. Then we go to people in finance and say, can we put that to a different project that's already been approved? We're not going out looking for new projects because that would take too long. We don't have time to do that. But because of tariffs and other issues for construction costs, there are some businesses that are saying, if we had $50,000 more, we could now do this. So we will be repurposing that money so that we can use it.
And that's what these limited service position folks are really focusing on in this.
That's correct.
And I'll note that this was the end of calendar year 2024. We worked with the Recovery Office I'm gonna use a Recovery Office term, but they helped us cure many of our remaining ARPA dollars and swap them out with general funds. So speaking specifically for DED, they're at the point where that ARPA money's gone. And all that's left now is general fund, which is a good thing because now, the hope is we complete everything by the end of 2026, but to the extent that, maybe a project goes a little bit long, which could happen. And I think that's a part of that exploration that's happening. It's not a hard and fast anymore. It's maybe there's some flexibility because it is state funds. So that's a real positive for DED is that within this CRP universe, there's no ARPA money left. It's really just state general fund dollars now. And I think that's a great thing. And within DED, I think they're down to their last maybe 500,000 or 600,000. So I think, I'm pretty confident that the ARPA will be gone. We're still certainly figuring out, okay, can we also get these state funds out the door in a timely manner? And that's, I think, like I said, we're still working on that, but ARPA is almost entirely spent at this point across the agency.
Thanks very much. And question for you, I think, is similar to a question I had for other folks. I'm having trouble understanding. I mean, I understand for each of the departments, there's an increase or a decrease, overall. I'm having trouble sort of fitting in the various programs we're talking about in terms of, what the change is, I guess. And it's sort of either up or down or whatever. And also sort of within the context of what the priorities of the agency are. Obviously, some departments are seeing increases, but it's hard to see from the spreadsheet, how much. And some are seeing decreases, and without, giving any opinion on any of that, it'd just be nice to know what those numbers were by program as opposed to, these categories. Maybe that's something that, you're going to develop later.
Well, I guess
Is that okay?
to step back for a moment, I think the tough job of communicating all the different moving pieces is that, what's primarily under consideration is we're requesting funding in state fiscal year 27 to support our ongoing operations. But in a lot of cases, like with CRP, this was a one-time appropriation that we received many years ago. We're not really asking for a change up or down one way or the other. It's money that exists that we've received that we're trying to just slowly, actually rapidly spend down. And so it's, other than us giving you sort of a status update of where things stand with that program, you're not going to see any numbers one way or the other, just because we're not asking for any changes to that one-time appropriation.
Right, because some of them are changing. Some of the program amounts are changing.
Yeah, and you would see those in the spreadsheet. It's just most of those, I've only gone through administration at this point.
Okay.
We only do very limited granting and I guess programmatic work beyond supporting other agency staff within that budget. So once we get into the ups and downs for DED, DHCD, and tourism and marketing, you would see how some of those programs may be changing in our ongoing annual operating budget.
I'm just interested in sort of how you made your priorities in terms of how you developed your priorities in terms of spending.
Our current priorities are to maintain the programs that are working and that are in place and the new one, CHIP. So we're looking at supporting housing, and a lot of what we do is supporting that. So, and part of that is workforce training and education, which is part of the Vermont training program. So when you go through our budget, you won't see a lot of increases necessarily. We're not adding staff, but we are maintaining the programs that are on these slides. There's a lot of federal money that comes in as a result of the programs that we offer. For example, the Apex program that is later in the slides, that 60% of the funding comes from the federal government for that, which is a really good slice of the pie. And I'm not answering your question. I'm just talking around it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Right. So Vermont training program, we've talked a little bit about that.
I got one more question on the ARPA funding. Have we, or is it too early to know if the federal government's going to try to claw any of that back?
It didn't happen in the recently passed federal fiscal 26 appropriations bill. And so unless the I guess the majority party in Congress decides to do another, I think what they call reconciliation bill, that can pass on a party line vote, maybe they try to claw back money then, but I don't see another vehicle presenting itself immediately. So I think we're going to get most of the way to the finish line before there would be a risk.
I think, the fallback would be if we appropriated something that shouldn't have been appropriated, because just thinking back in the days when we were pushing this money out the door, there were some concerns from some that we may be pushing it too fast and we didn't meet the.
Yeah, that's
But
I mean, it's-
haven't heard anything.
It's quite possible that the federal auditors come calling, and, you know, the hope is that across state government enterprise, we've got the support that we need to
So far, we,
justify those expenditures that we've made.
thank you.
And as we've seen, anything's possible, but we're trying to get the money out so that there isn't money in that pot, the clawback.
And we also paid Guidehouse a lot of money to help us think through those challenges.
Remember that.
What complies with the ARPA legislation doesn't.
Thank you.
Another federal program is the International Trade Program, the STEP program. And that supports businesses with marketing and international trade. And you'll say, well, is it working so that when they go overseas to these trade shows, is it actually working and how much are you giving them? It's not a lot of money when we're giving $5,000 or $6,000 to a business to go overseas to do work. And you'll recognize businesses such as in Rutland Town, Ann Clark Cookie Cutters, 7 million cookie cutters a year. The only other competitor they have is the entire country of China, and they have used this program. Cabot Hosiery, which is in Northfield, Liquid Measurement Systems in Fairfax, Vermont Natural Coatings in Hardwick. So there are a lot of different companies in a lot of different sectors that are using that funding. And then there's Northern Borders. You probably saw recent announcements that came out. We're very fortunate to receive the amount of money we received through the Northern Borders Commission, Regional Commission. The governor has worked very hard and is on that task force, and he works hard to bring money to Vermont. And then you'll see the captive insurance industry. Another announcement went out. We have 707 active captive companies in the portfolio in Vermont. There are 500 jobs that have been created, and in just 1 year, $33 million worth of fees came into the state of Vermont to pay the staff who's doing that stuff, but also there's money left over. And so that goes back into the general fund.
There's dollars that we received that are going to PED as well to Brittany's
Money to deep, right?
salary.
It's for Brittany's salary, her marketing, and quite frankly, she's amazing at that, and that's why a lot of this is happening. Yeah. Then there's Apex, and that is the connector between government contracts and Vermont businesses. And you'll see the amounts of money there that are brought in just in 1 year through government contracts and the number of businesses involved. So the money that is in the budget right now supports these programs, and we would like to have those continue. And was that my last slide, Dan?
I believe so.
Can we jump to the DED ups and downs?
I was gonna say, so Dan, is the kind of thing that's going to be in the book that we'll see tomorrow gonna show us how these programs are,
Yes.
you know, broken out? How much increase year on year, all of the pieces, because I mean, one of the questions that's really hard for us to evaluate is which programs are being run, how their return on investment is. Are there duplicative programs? Maybe not within ACCD, hopefully not, but maybe they are, but are they across government? And those are the kinds of things, right? Like if ACCD is running a program that is working really well and getting a great return on investment, but one of the other agencies has a similar program that isn't quite doing that well, why aren't we using the program that's doing well and making sure everything is going through that, you know, simplifying, right? So those are the kind of things that are really hard for us to even know when we get a budget that looks like this.
Yeah, so I can say that the documentation that you will receive tomorrow will have additional detail on the breakout by program of how we allocate funds, especially as far as it concerns granting. So we do a separate breakdown of, you know, here are all the different grant initiatives we have. Here's how they're funded compared to the prior year. Here's how we request they be funded this year. And I mean, the one thing that wouldn't show you is, I mean, we do work within the ACCD universe. I know the commissioners are all working across state government on coordinating how we, you know, speaking of housing specifically, how do we as an entire state of Vermont government do everything we can to get more housing online. And so I know those conversations are happening, but what what those documents are going to show is us making a recommendation on here's what we think is duplicative and here's what we think isn't duplicative, because I think that wouldn't, for ACCD to say that, it wouldn't necessarily be fair to other agencies that maybe think their work is important. I think that's a decision that's made at the, at the fifth floor level within the pavilion of, we're finance and management looking across the state of Vermont and supposed to be reviewing those types of redundancies and eliminating them, or proposing, I guess, to eliminate them. And so what I provide you isn't necessarily going to tell that story, but you'll at least be able to see this is what we do on a more granular level, and hopefully allow you to at least, maybe it won't give you all the answers, but it could trigger questions that, I'm certainly happy to answer if you have follow-up requests for info. So I don't know if that's helpful.
And we call that braiding funding. So if we're looking at the Vermont VTrans and our department and marketing and housing, we create a stack, and that stack gets things done. And so it is important that that communication happens, and it's happening.
And then those federal programs that you mentioned, I'm assuming that the federal money is covering all of that, or is there state money covering some of that, or how, right? Like understanding those pieces too is hard for us.
Yeah, and some of that you'll see filter through here in this ups and downs when we get to, well, we're on DD now, but also for DHCD. So what I can say at a high level is at this time, there's only one federal source of funding that's going away in FY27, but that's not so much driven by changes with this administration. It's something that was sunsetting to begin with. And so that's the Office of Economic Advancement. It's initiative within the Department of Defense. So that's a program that DED was managing. And so you'd see within this ups and downs where some of that OEA spending authority is falling out because that program has ended. But other than that, what we know, or what we're assuming at this time, is our federal funding, our other sources of federal funding will continue. However, all those sources are flat as a pancake. And so the challenge that creates is when there's staff managing those programs, obviously those costs and benefits continue to rise, and those have been pressures on our general fund dollars. And so, when we work on the budget year over year, we now have to, not only for our 100% state funded staff and initiatives, have to figure out how to budget those, but also any growth in staff and administration costs for federal initiatives that we think are important to continue, we now have to support those with the limited pool of general fund dollars. So that's something challenging that, I've certainly dealt with. I've only been at ACCD for a few years, but I think every year I've been there, it's been pretty stagnant as far as the federal funding that's coming in, at least for ongoing programs. I'm certainly thankful for CDBG disaster recovery money that we got. That's fantastic. It's going to make a huge difference. And there are some other sources that are new, but more one-time in nature that we're fortunate to have received. But as far as our ongoing federal programmatic dollars, those are flat, and it's a challenge for us.
Commissioner Farrell?
If you want to stay up here, I'll go through these, and if they have questions that I can answer, then I can answer. So I'm going to focus on one column at a time and just work my way down. So on the general fund side, just like with administration, we've got costs that are sort of, cost pressures that are sort of out of our hands as far as salaries, benefits. Moving down to, there's a line that says negative 130,000. This is what I'm calling a technical correction to what ended up in the final DD appropriation last year in Act 27. If you recall, we had come to the legislature requesting 350,000 of base money for international business recruitment. And that sort of came out, went back in, came out, went back in, and then finally ended up as a smaller one-time appropriation. But when it came out of the operating budget, the budget conference committee took 150,000 out of our grant funds, when really they should have taken 150,000 out of personal services and operating. So this negative 130 and then a negative 20 and a plus 150, that's basically recalibrating that funding to where it needs to be. So it brings the 150 back into grants and takes it out of where it should have. So it's just a technical correction. Moving down, with the general fund general fund growth that we were allotted, DD's been able to increase a little bit of its budget for, attending travel and trade shows to network and work with other, potential business partners. A small increase in our miscellaneous operating on the general fund side. And that's really it substantively for the general fund. So I'll move over to this special fund category, and I'll just say that there are sort of two changes happening under special funds. So going back to the captive program that Brittany Nevins manages, her program is funded by the Captive Insurance Regulatory Special Fund, and that's fed by the captive insurance premiums tax. Over the past few years, what has occurred is the funding that comes to DD for the work that we do in the captive universe has been relatively flat, which has been a little bit of a struggle because Brittany obviously wants to be able to maximize the impact that she can have on marketing Vermont as a great place to do business for captive industries. So this year we were finally able to convince the fifth floor to allocate a little bit more money for her program. And so on the salary wages side, and then down here, this 10,968 for captive, that's that little bit of increase that we got to do a little bit more to market Vermont for captive industry. And I think it ended up being about a 3% increase over last year. So, but we'll take it. And then the big number, this 150,000 under the statute that authorizes the TIF program. We, as part of a TIF application, we are able to contract with an entity that could do an economic analysis of a specific project and sure, sort of ascertain whether it makes sense financially or doesn't make sense financially. And so we're now extending that to the CHIP program, which we anticipate will be a much busier program as far as the number of applications flowing in. And so this 150,000 essentially money that will bring in, we're asking spending authority to then send it back out the door. And so when a municipality applies and submits a CHIP application, they're essentially going to pay us a flat amount of money that we expect that they would end up paying for this economic analysis, because we can bill that to the applicant. And then we pay it to the person or the entity that does the analysis. In this case, we've been working with Jeff Carr, who's the executive branch economist. So this is simply money that's coming in and going right back out the door again, and doesn't really hit. Yeah. On the federal side, there are two things changing. So most of this decrease is just the OEA funding falling out. And then one thing I had failed to mention is on the brownfield side, the federal program isn't ending completely, but we don't currently have an active grant award with the federal government. And so at this time, we are not in need of spending authority, which, I say that like it's a good thing. We're not asking for spending authority because we don't currently have an active grant award. The hope is that later in calendar year 26, we can send an application to EPA and hopefully get some new money coming in to support that program. But currently, I think we're on the cusp of obligating the last bit of federal money that we have, and then we don't have an active award to keep spending.
So ask in the budget, state dollars for brownfields.
Not this year. And then interdepartmental transfer, the only thing I'll note here is with these ARPA positions, we had been receiving some money from the recovery office to support the cost of the position, but I believe the money that they had to support limited service positions statewide that were doing ARPA work ran out. And so we then had to bring those positions onto what remained of our CRP, our programmatic dollars to support the cost. So we no longer need that interdepartmental transfer spending authority because we're not getting money from the recovery office. And that's the DD operating budget.
Are there any reversions in DED's budget that are going back to the new budget? They're not being spent within, I mean, reversions that are being spent within your own budget, DED's. I'm wondering, are there any other reversions that are going in building this new budget outside of DED?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, between DED and the administration division, there was leftover money from the BGAP program that is proposed to be reverted in the governor's budget and put back to use, statewide as part of the general fund bucket.
But that BGAT money was supposed to go to DEDA.
Some of that remaining money did go to VEDA, but we had more than that. And so the remainder, I guess, sorry, I'll correct. So 2 million, I believe, went to VEDA, but we had, I think, I'll have to get the number for you, but we had more than that 2 million left. And so that money is being reverted in the governor's budget construct and would be deployed elsewhere. At the time that we built last year's budget and proposed capitalizing VEDA, we thought we would have spent more of what ended up remaining. And so we only asked that 2 million go to VEDA.
Because there was some, I think there were some awesome, I think you thought that money was encumbered and it didn't it didn't pan out, or?
I think we were still dealing with active applications and receiving applications. So we didn't want to put ourselves in a position where we wouldn't have enough after sending the money to VEDA to support grants. And so we were conservative with what we allocated for VEDA, but it ended up we had more. So that will be reverted in the governor's budget.
Okay, yeah, we'd be interested to know what that amount.
Is that-
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think this is exactly right.
Did you have a question?
No, so that information will be in the budget document we'll get tomorrow?
Yeah,
What type of information?
for each department, I have, so we submit it's essentially a spreadsheet that we submit to the fifth floor as far as like carry forward requests. So any monies that we have left over, and they say yes, or they say no. And in the case of BGAP, they said, no, we're going to revert that. So you'll see that document.
We'll see that in that document as well. Thank you.
Okay,
Sure, how are you?
good. Thank you for having me.
I think this is the first time that we've had you come in
Wait,
talk to us about your budget. Well, usually we didn't have housing as our purview, but I think that's changed with all the issues with workforce and how we intertwine now with general and housing. So welcome, glad to have you here.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, for the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner at the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I've interacted with a lot of you in the housing space because housing does touch your jurisdiction. It touches really everything that we're doing right now. And so I just like to give a little bit of a caveat that when I end up in a committee that isn't directly a housing committee, I don't have the opportunity to cover the whole world of what we're doing in housing. So I don't want you all to have the impression that what I'm going to talk about today is everything we're doing. But always more than happy to come back and keep talking about where our work intersects. So I'll touch on a couple places where I do think that this committee would have some interest. But first, I'll cover the department at a high level. So we are a team of, looks like in FY27 will be about 40. That is reflective of losing what we anticipate to be 7 limited service positions. And that is spread across all 4 divisions in our department. So if you're looking at the slide deck, you'll see an organizational chart which shows you the 4 divisions of our department. And, folks do forget that historic preservation and the state-owned historic sites are within our department. So we have a great diversity of activities in our portfolio. It's a lot of fun. As well as a substantial amount of federal funds that we administer through the Vermont Community Development Program. The slide after that, there are some names that I'm not going to walk through, but are good for you to have for your reference. This is the leadership team in our department. And we're all eager to help if you ever reach out. Now, the next slide is our primary budget ask, one of our two budget asks, but this is our base funding ask, and it's VHIP. Before I go into VHIP, I do want to pause. So in your inboxes, you'll see a stat sheet, one for VHIP and one for MER, just to give you some background data. But I like to always say at a high level, programmatic investments aren't necessarily where we move the needle in terms of the number of units in housing. It is really where we can round out the hard edges of the market or maybe correct for some of the flaws in our housing stock. Where we really move the needle truly in housing is things like, well, federal monetary policy, which we can't influence, but things like land use and permitting, substantial changes there is where you can really move the needle in terms of hundreds or thousands of units. Same thing with the scale of investment that was enabled with CHIP. Obviously, we'll have to see. We're enabling investment, not making it. So we'll see what happens there. But that can move the needle. When we talk about programs, we're really trying to target a specific problem within the housing market. These investments will create dozens or hundreds of units in a year, but it's not necessarily the investments that are going to close our housing gap. Just for frame of reference, we produce in the neighborhood of 2,500 units per year. And what we need to be producing is more like 7,500 units per year, just to give you a sense of scale. Now, the reason for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, VHIP, has really risen to the top of the administration's interest in wanting to make this a permanent program with base funding is because it's a recognition that it addresses a few of Vermont's unique housing challenges, which is we have a very old housing stock. And we have a lot of communities in Vermont with housing stock that is no longer adequate or safe to live in. What VHIP has done is said, let's look at the housing stock we already had, knowing we need to build new. We know that we need to build thousands more units every year, but we have communities like Rutland, Newport, Brandon. I'm sure everybody can think of that broken down house that once housed somebody, but no longer is because it's just not in any condition to house folks. So 1,200 units over the last 5 years have been produced because VHIP has provided an incentive for property owners to either bring those units back online that have fallen into disrepair. It's given them the ability to split up their big farmhouse or Victorian from a big 5-bedroom single-family home, split it up into a bunch of 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. So that hits on another unique Vermont housing challenge. We're overhoused. Used to be in the 60s and 70s, our most common housing type, household makeup was 4 people in a home. By far, the most common household makeup in Vermont now is 1 and 2 people. And our housing stock doesn't reflect that. So VHIP has actually made more out of the housing stock we already have. That checks a lot of boxes for preservationists, for environmental conservationists, for private property owners, and for folks in need of affordable housing. VHIP caters towards folks who use housing vouchers by following HUD fair market rents. And if somebody chooses our 5-year covenant option, that property owner is going to be rehousing somebody exiting homelessness, working with a coordinated entry provider. What has been great about VHIP and some of our early exit data has shown these are property owners who would have never considered being affordable housing providers before. But because of this incentive and because it let them invest in their property, they are affordable housing providers now, and they're staying affordable housing providers. 96% of those whose 5-year covenants are going to expire this year are going to keep their tenants, and they're going to keep the same rent. That's fantastic. They're under no requirement to do that, but the relationship has been built. And so VHIP is bringing more people into the universe of who is developing housing, who is an affordable housing provider, which is going to be my segue into the next thing I'm going to talk about. But before I do, I'll wrap up the VHIP topic just to say, we have made do with one-time funding tranches for a few years now, because with ARPA, we were able to make such substantial investments that with $10, $15 million coming in at a time, we could push a lot through, and we were given limited service staff so that we could keep the program running. With limited service from the ARPA era expiring, we are now at the maturity phase of this program where we need to put it in the base. Need to do that for a couple of reasons. That one, that Dan or Secretary Curley alluded to earlier, which is that we want to give predictability to our partners, to applicants, to municipalities, to communities who want to know on an annual basis, can they rely on VHIP and to what extent can they rely on VHIP? The other is just the reality, it's staffing. There are now over 1,000 covenants out there that we need to monitor and administer. And so without staff to do that, we're reliant on, I guess, the goodwill of folks to make sure that they adhere to these. We cannot seek permanent staff without base funding. This base funding will provide us an opportunity to go to the position pool to seek permanent positions. That's not a guarantee, of course, but it at least gives us the pathway to get this. And this base funding makes VHIP permanent. A one-time appropriation this year means VHIP is done after this year.
How many positions are you asking for?
It will be 2. The manufactured home improvement and repair program made its way into the base budget last year. So we don't have a new base ask for that this year. I'll cover that in a minute with our one time, but we were successful in getting a position from the position pool, one position to administer MER, the manufactured home improvement repair program. So that was a great success. I'm going to deviate from the budget conversation just for a minute to give you all a little bit of information on where our efforts intersect with your jurisdiction and where I think we are trying to answer the question of who is creating housing. And so I'll hand these out. If you want to take one to pass around, maybe I'll split the deck here. This question of who is developing affordable housing and how, we're trying to answer with our Homes for All initiative. Hopefully some folks here have heard of the Homes for All toolkit, which was published in the spring of 2024. If you haven't seen the Homes for All toolkit, Chair Mahali is hogging several on his bookcase. And so I encourage you to go look at those. Maybe even bring one down here. The Homes for All initiative is a 3-phase initiative. And what you're looking at right now is a description of phase 2 Homes for All, which is let's bring that toolkit to life and let's build curriculum around what it means to become a small scale developer and to operate as a small scale developer. When I say small scale, we're talking about is ADUs up to 4-unit multifamily buildings. What do we see a lot of in Vermont right now? We see large single family homes, right? So we see custom builders who do high-end single family homes, or we see large developers who do big multifamily development. What doesn't happen as much in Vermont is this small scale development. This is what we're trying to enable with this multi-phase project. So phase 2 launching in a couple weeks, launching next week, with our first training, is this hands-on training of folks who want to become small scale developers, giving them the tools and the knowledge to do that. In-person workshops as well as online curriculum. So you can learn more about that here. The third phase, which I won't dive into much today, is bringing those to life with a catalog of designs that are going to be open source designs, 10 designs that any builder can choose to use. So save 10% off their budget right there by using our designs. And we're working with 3 pilot communities who are going to adopt those designs as pre-approved in their residential areas. We are also proposing in our housing bill this year to make that statewide, so that in residential districts across the state, those 10 designs will be pre-approved for any small scale developer that wants to build with those. So that's Homes for All in 5 minutes. Any questions before I move on?
Always, 877. Tied into those, right?
That's right, because elements of Homes for All touch offsite construction, because we're asking for the designs to be both eligible for onsite and offsite. And so we are very interested in that. I'm going to move on to our only one-time funding request, which is for the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program, MER. Again, there's a stat sheet in your inbox if you want to look at more specifics on where those investments go. But again, this is a program that made it into the base budget last year. We are repurposing $800,000 that had been to essentially supplement FEMA investments where FEMA was coming up short. And we're using this for the same essentially the same population, manufactured home communities across the state. The reason these are so important is for an average of just $7,000 per grant, we're able to keep precariously housed households a unit and make that unit last several more years. Right now, when we're in a race to get enough units online to safely house these precariously housed folks, buying 4 or 5 years in a unit and making that unit safe, healthy for these families is tremendous, especially in many parts of the state that are suffering from the greatest housing shortages, especially when it comes to homeownership. This is a path to homeownership for a lot of people who can't get a traditional mortgage. These are chattel loans, who wouldn't be able to afford the mortgage for a traditional stick-built home. So this creates a lot of opportunity, but this also invests in manufactured homes communities themselves to make the whole community healthier, safer. I've listed here other efforts that are underway. I'm not going to walk through the list. Some of them, in fact, one of them you're going to hear about tomorrow, the Verda report, but more than happy to come back and talk about more of our efforts another time. Dan, ups and downs?
Sure. So the DHCD ups and downs, because there's a lot going on, it's broken up over 2 pages. I think you're probably pressed for time, so I was just going to focus on page 2 and really just drill down on some of the grant changes, because that may be what you're more interested in seeing. But if you have questions on other pieces of this, I'm happy to answer them. But I just know you guys have a lot of things to deal with, so I want to be quick. So on the grant side, for general fund, the DHCD has, over the past several years, been issuing what's called downtown vibrancy grants for municipalities that join the downtown program. So we anticipate 4 new designated downtowns in FY27, and we intend to provide $25,000 grants to each one. So that's there. The big number here is the new base money that we're requesting for VHIP, $3.75 million to issue grants. Remaining $250,000 is for staffing. And then MER, we got $2 million total for MER. In order to staff that, we shifted $100,000 of that money from granting to personal services so we could support the position costs. On the transportation fund side, we have been issuing grants for EV support equipment build out. Primarily, I think, around residential units or within residential units. Those grants have been, or we've had funding for those grants courtesy of one-time appropriations that have come to us. But the statute now dictates that fees tied to EV vehicles and to some extent hybrid vehicles are supposed to go from the T funds to DHCD to continue providing these grants. And so what we have here is an appropriation from the T fund to back up basically what the statute's directed. On the special fund side, the latest revenue forecast for the state did anticipate some increase in the property transfer tax revenues. Those revenues to some extent feed grants that we provide to the RPCs and to municipalities. So you see this 161,000. That's supporting some increased granting activity. And then the big number here, this 18 million, this is the remaining money from the CDBG Disaster Recovery Award that we plan to grant out. We plan to grant out in FY27, although the reality is there's going to be a meeting in April of this year to pick basically who will receive the funds, but then those grant agreements have to be drafted. That will probably stretch into the next fiscal year. And so the spending authority is to tie those funds up in FY27. And then the interdepartmental transfer side, you heard a little bit about our Homes for All 802 homes. The only reason we've been able to perform this initiative or implement this initiative is courtesy of one-time money that AHS was kind enough to pass along to us. It was about 1.5 million. We've spent some of it in prior years. We had anticipated spending 600,000 in FY26, and so that money will be gone in FY27. And then finally, EVSE, the way we, I guess, constructed the budget in FY26 for this money, it was essentially going to go to AOT, and then they were going to transfer it to us to then provide grants we're no longer going to do it that way because it's a little bit cumbersome. So instead, we're now getting a direct appropriation from the transportation fund. So the funding, the spending authority comes directly to us. I know that was very fast. Any questions on all of that?
I have a question that you didn't say. And Commissioner, you said you had 7 limited service positions that are going away. Were any of them unfilled? Were any of them vacant? And are any of them, they were all filled? Are any of them converting to longer term positions?
So the pathway for that is to go to the position pool to seek a permanent position. In order to do that, we need to point to permanent funding. That doesn't exist yet. So if we get VHIP funding, we will seek to.
For that, okay, that's that 250.
Although one of those limited service positions is for the MER program.
Oh,
So
that's
now that we
right.
do have a permanent, we can transition.
That's true. That position will become permanent.
So if all the stars align, 3 of the 7 positions are gonna become permanent.
That's right.
Do you have any of the 40 positions in your department? Do you have any vacant positions?
Any, again, in your department, any reversions that are going into not staying within your department, but going into general to build the budget?
I mean, technically, the funds that we're requesting for MER was a reversion.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah, but that's within. But
Yeah, that stays within
That-
DHCD.
Yeah,
reversions that are going, now being pulled by,
I think so.
We had a couple of very small unspent amounts. I think in one
Oh, yeah.
one-time bucket, it was like 1,000. I think in another, it was 5,000 that we just weren't going to spend. So other than that, it was just the 800 and it ended up being 831,000. 800 of that will come back to us from MER. 31 will stay.
We graciously donated 30,000.
Yeah, to the cost.
I think we've got to move on to our next, so we'll bring you back next week and we'll have all the numbers. That's, this was very good. This is probably the best one that I've sat through in this committee. So thank you for that. And, we'll come back and look at the numbers after you presented them to appropriations.
And I apologize for not having all the detailed information for you today, but I look forward to getting it to you ASAP.
So I'm happy with it, so thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Informative, thank you.
Or the DEDs? Not gross anything.
So we have no time for Heather?
Not today, next week.
I will sharpen my pencils.
Alrighty. Well, I think we'll have more numbers then too.
Hard to have fewer. Okay.
Noted. You have anybody else that's,
Susan's out there. Else is out there.
we want to come
I think
in?
it's just Susan. Oh, and Todd's coming down.
Why don't we go off live for 5 minutes? Everybody take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes? 5 minutes?